Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give an update on the latest improvements and releases of PentagonDocs Assistant. We'll also quickly cover the roadmap to the things that come in the near future. And we'll also just have a quick overview of what the version 5 Vault did bring for those of you who are still using a version 4 Vault at the moment. Okay, so the latest updates, we're still working on rebranding. That's an ongoing exercise, so you'll see that being updated as we go through all these new releases. There's AutoCAD 2025 and AutoCAD Architecture 2025 support, Revit 2025 support. As part of the Revit update, we've also now support the native PDF export option that Revit 2024 brought to us, and is now available in those new versions. And something else we brought in from the version 5 client, which you now need to use. That will give you access to the no pre-processing publish dialog, which improves things as you work in Revit. So the rebranding, previously Excited Docs, this is all being updated now. We're moving to the PentagonDocs Assistant branding. There's a lot to change, so in the background there's a lot of help documentation that'll be done, all the applications, etc. So you'll see this coming into play with all these new releases. The AutoCAD and AutoCAD Architecture support. So we've added 2025. This, along with the Revit 2025 support, Autodesk made a lot of changes. So we actually had to rewrite everything. So that's why this took a bit longer than it would normally take us to do an update in the past. But this is all now being completed. As always, we only support what Autodesk support. So the previous 2022, 23 and 24 versions are also supported. On the Revit side of things, likewise, that's all been rewritten. And we also support the Autodesk supported versions. Did also mention that we now support the Revit PDF export option. So in the settings within the Revit ribbon, there's now a PDF export engine that you can select. We've always had legacy support in there for the Bullzip PDF printer. There's the Excited Docs PDF printer, which we currently use. But you can now also select Revit export. And that is just the native Revit PDF export functionality. So where in the past there may have been the odd thing that went slightly different because you're using the PDF printer, now you can just completely rely on what Revit is giving you as PDF output. Along with that, there's also an option to change your publish dialog type. And what this basically means is currently when you bring up the publish dialog, for all the sheets that you have in your Revit model, it just checks them against what's in PDA and mfiles, so make sure all the properties are up to date. And in general use, that can take a little while to open. For those of you who have thousands of sheets in your Revit models, it can literally take minutes and minutes to open, which obviously we recognise isn't the best user experience. So you can now set it to do none of the pre-processing. So it's a lightweight publish dialog, as we call it. That will load all the sheets in, which still can take a little while, but it's now seconds rather than minutes to load 1,000 sheets. What you would then do is locate the sheets you want to work with, select them, and only at that point would you then say, well, I want to refresh this. So it would update it from the vault to make sure that everything's where it should be. And then you can go on and publish just those selected sheets. So, if you just want to publish, 10 sheets out of 1,000, rather than before that might be a 10-minute process, now it's a minute. So it's a big time saving. Just talk about the roadmap and the things that still come in shortly, especially with transmittals. This is in the final stages of testing. We just had a new build. The transmittals is quite an in-depth change because we changed the way the whole back end works. It's now using databases to manage and cache information. That's where all the speed improvements comes from. So when we do look at deploying this, it will need a test phase just to make sure you're happy with it. It does pick up all of your transmittals and migrate them correctly, etc. Following on from that, we're still going to be looking at the document naming, so improving how that works. So currently you associate a naming convention to a document class. So you have lots of naming conventions, you have lots of document classes, that needs more management and maintenance. The metadata card configuration may need lots of different configuration elements. What we're looking to do is, instead of having a document class per naming convention, we'd literally have a property you can pick that is a naming convention. So that still be configured in a similar way to do nowadays, but instead it would be a drop down, and that could be set as default for a project. So when you just create a drawing, it'll pick up the default naming that you set up and then go on from there. So again, that will be a big improvement for where we are at the moment. We're also looking to introduce the full BIM 360 support for Revit models. They can sit in BIM 360 at the moment. I imagine many of you are already using them in that location, but some of our tools in the ribbon don't function correctly with the BIM 360 located model. So for example, when you want to sync the model from the central model into PDA, at the moment that will error, so it doesn't recognize the path. So we're looking to obviously get that working for you, and also looking into, can we create a model directly into BIM 360 for you as part of the model creation process. Something else we're looking at, which will bring, again, a lot of flexibility, is changing the Revit sheet ID that we use. So currently we have relied on what Revit produces. So that gives a unique value for every single sheet that you create in a Revit model. And that seemed like a thing to use in the past, and it works, but it does cause issues. So, we have had customers in the past where they'll work on a model during the concept phase, and then when it moves into other project phases for design, etc., they would typically just copy that model and then carry on working. But because the ID stay the same within the model, that would mean you'd have two models tied to the same sheet in PDA. So we want to move away from that, use our own Revit sheet ID. It'll give a lot more flexibility in those instances. It should also allow us to bring back the use of Revit templates. So you could have a Revit template model that already has sheets set up. That could be used, and then we could have a nice simple process within Revit. It would say, right, add all these sheets to PDA now, and it would do it in one hit. So that would bring us, a lot more flexibility. I mentioned I'll just go over what the key updates were for PentagonDocs Assistant version 5. These have been around for quite a while now, but not everybody has upgraded to the latest version. So these are just some of the key items that were done. There are a lot of fixes and usability enhancements. PDF Chameleon was added. This allows us to create a PDF out of Revit that works in the same way, if you like, that an AutoCAD DWG would, in that you can just move that PDF through the workflow in PDA and we can update it directly. So rather than having to publish once out of Revit a WIP, then it goes for an approval, then you go back to Revit and publish again to create your issued, shared or published object, you can just move that through workflow within PDA. We also added the ability to have revision history properties per object, and this can be configured per project. What this essentially does is create a set of history properties for the revisions, which it takes from the version history of the actual drawing. So that's where it gets the information from. And this allows you to sync that through to your AutoCAD or Revit title blocks, so it will populate the revision history for you. We also added updates for the ISO 19650 UK Annex 2021 update. So this had things like a much shorter list of forms or types to use. So previously there's quite a detailed list. This brought it down to half a dozen or so, and some other slight changes around issue statuses, etc. Also, as part of that, it did say that if you're going to use a classification solution for your drawings, it should be uniclass. So we've also added uniclass, and that can be enabled per project. That will show the properties on the documents as you create them, allowing you to select them. It can be added as part of the file name when you issue them as well, etc. We also enhanced the project rules. So as an example of this, we did have customers where they were told by their clients that they could not use the originator code that they have been using. And previously you had to go around, create another company, make sure we use that for this particular project, etc. Now there's a simple rule on the project that says you can override your originator code, you can enter it on the project, and that is the originator code that we use for that particular project. You can also change the way the workflow works. So at the moment, there's a select issue state. So as you move through the approval state, get to work in progress approved, and then you say, right, I want to prepare this for issue. It creates another document at the select issue state. You go to that then, say where it's going to be shared, S3, issue it, and it moves on from there. You can now disable that. So instead of it creating that second phase, if you like, of the issue process, but if you've got document controller, that could be exactly how you want it to be. But if you're just a CAD person who's also issuing the information, you can now disable that on a project. You are then forced to add in whether it's shared or published and the CDE status before you send it for approval. And then when you get to WIP approved and you say prepare for issue, it just issues it straight away. There's no second pickup. So that's an enhancement for you there. We also added some references. So it makes it much easier to see related documents. So if you're on a WIP document, there's a little search URL you can click. When you open that, it will show you all the WIP issued and archived documents for that particular document number in the PDA mfiles client. So rather than the CDE tab where you can still see information, but you have to click on each individually, you can now just see them in the client and you can very quickly see the differences in metadata, viewing them, etc. And also when you issue a document, so if it's shared or published, it also creates a link back to the specific version of the WIP document it was created. So that again just makes it much quicker for you to find original information should you need to. There were also updates to the CDE work in progress workflow. We added a rejected state. So when something gets rejected from approval, it can sit to that state, be easily seen, notifications can be sent out. So it allows you to manage your documents more effectively. We improve the error messages. So rather than it being quite a technical error message saying a property is missing, it now gives you a more descriptive error message of saying, oh, please fill out this property is missing, and it tells you exactly what it is. We also improve things around that select issue state issue part of the process. In the Docs 4 vault, you'll end up with 2 drawing numbers, that documents with the same drawing number, so they look the same, can be a bit confusing. We now rename that one that's waiting to have its issue state selected to say, please select issue state on the end of it, so it's very clear to you which is which. We also improve the handling of external BIM and incoming documents. So that could be quite a laborious process in the old version of the Vault. You would have to manually drag and drop onto an existing document if you wanted to replace it, manually rename it. Now it does this all automatically. So when you bring documents in, we can capture what the base document number, so the unique document number is. So when you then bring in further documents in the future, it automatically finds those, updates them, renames them if the file name's changed, all on the fly. So it's a much slicker process. And we also added better ways to handle the multi-file documents. So there are some of you who say, for example, you bring in photos, you don't want those converted to multi-file document. So there are rules to do that. We've made how that's all managed much simpler in the version 5 Vault. So if you create new classes, you can just add the new class to a metadata card view, and that will pick that up.